A really good thing to do is to go and look at the actual different types of questions that you might have. And by doing that, I think you can sort of answer what is the question asking me, so when you're given a particular question. What do we mean by that? We mean that each question will have a certain word in it, and it's asking you to do something. So, for example, if you get asked to analyze something, that means to break it into parts and identify the main features. If you get asked to calculate something, that's obviously to perform some sort of arithmetic with your calculator. Complete something, that'll be to finish a report, a stock card, or a ledger. Define something, state the meaning of a term. Determine, which is the same as calculate, so we use that in accounting to say, can you perform a calculation? Discuss, which we'll have a video later on just on discuss questions, but that's usually one of the bigger questions about provide arguments for or against, strengths or weaknesses, advantages and disadvantages, benefits and costs, and so on, and then perhaps give your opinion. We also have evaluate, which is basically the same as discuss, except for it can all be from the one viewpoint. For example, you could give all advantages and no disadvantages, whereas with discuss you need a balanced argument. Explain something, so it's kind of like a definition, but you've got to make it more detailed. You've got to make the meaning of the thing a little bit clearer and more understandable. Identify, determine or establish as being a particular thing. So for example, this transaction is an asset. You're classifying it as a particular thing. Justify, provide reasons for your choice. So maybe you get a question where it says, why did you pick reducing balance depreciation for a car? And you need to now give some reasons to back up your selection. Prepare something, so that could be a report, a stock card, or a ledger. And just to explain, so the yellow boxes would be theory questions and the blue boxes are practical questions. Reconstruct, that is for a ledger when we are budgeting. So when we're reconstructing ledgers for future periods, that's a reconstruction. We also have record, so processing a transaction in some sort of accounting document, like a journal or a stock card. Show, which means complete a ledger. You see these questions a lot. Show how the ledger would look. State, to identify or list something. Suggest, provide a recommendation of action for the owner. So there are all the past questions we've had. There may be something new, but in the main, there'll just be variations of the ones we've already seen. Looking at the types of questions and how much they've appeared. So there's an analyze. What we'll do for each type is look at, since 2012, what percentage of all questions have been this type? And what was the average mark? So you can see analyze has barely been on there, but when it has, it's been big, 6 marks. Calculate's pretty common, 7%, and they're usually little boxes, so you can see the average mark's usually only about 2 marks. Complete, so complete a stock card or a ledger, that's about 11% of the exam, and 4 to 5 marks, so a bigger question. Define has barely been on there recently. We sort of moved on from that. We're after more difficult sort of forms of assessment now. Determine, again, a bit basic, not as common as it used to be, and very few marks for that. And this is one that's going to increase in importance, discuss. So only 6% of questions since 2012 have been discussed, but the average marks have been very high, and you can see it's usually just a big bank of blank lines that you need to fill in. Evaluate is very similar to discuss, has barely appeared on the exam, however. Explain is the second most common type of question. So we looked at making the meaning of something very clear. It's a theory question, so remember the yellow boxes mean theory, the blue boxes mean practical. You can see usually a small question, 2 to 3 marks for an explain, but 1 in every 5 marks since 2012 has been an explain question. Identify has barely popped up. Again, we've kind of taken the course in a little more of a difficult direction, so there's probably not going to be as many identify marks as there used to be. Justify has barely appeared. Prepare is the most common type of question. Since 2012, 1 in every 4 marks has been for prepare, and that's your classic practical questions such as doing a schedule of debtors, a balance sheet, a cash flow statement, a general journal, a ledger, that sort of thing. Reconstruct is for budgeting, reconstructing ledgers for future periods, so it's not always on the exam. You can see when it is though, 6 marks, so it's usually quite a big topic. Recording transactions in journals and stock cards is 9% of the recent marks and 5 marks for doing so, so one of the bigger questions. Showing how ledgers would look is a big part of the course, 8% and usually quite a few marks. State, again, a little bit basic, we've sort of moved on from it, it's only 1% of the exam. and suggest, probably quite similar. Maybe it's to suggest a strategy, like the question you can see, that sort of thing might still be on the paper. Looking at, so if you do a bit of an analysis, the percentage of all question types, 1 in every 4 questions since 2012, and including 2012, has been prepared. 21% has been explained, so you can see we've got the most common practical question is a prepare, the most common theory question is an explain, and then we get down to about discuss, and we see they're the ones that seem to appear the most. So maybe go back through past papers, look for prepares, explains, completes, records, shows, calculates, and discuss. And then you can see the others. They might even be on there some years, but they have been on there at some point in the last 3 years. This is quite interesting too, the average marks for each question. You can see the biggest questions, we've got 2 theory and 2 practical. So the 2 biggest theories, analyze has barely been on there, but when it was quite big, and discuss as well. In terms of practical, reconstruction of ledgers and also recording transactions, they're usually the biggest questions. These mid-sized questions, so you've got completing, say, ledgers or journals, preparing ledgers, evaluating a theory question, and then showing is to do with ledgers as well. Then you've got some questions that are sort of a little bit mid-range, suggest, explain, identify. Remember, this is the second most common type of question on the exam. That's usually a little one, 2 to 3 marks. And then you've got the ones that are just, we're probably not going to see as much as we used to, particularly these ones. We probably want more from students now than we did, but they could still appear on the paper.